Chapter 6. Mr. Edwards. "Where the heck have you been?" said Mum, shooting up from her chair in the waiting room as I crashed through the door of the solicitors, slipping to a stop on the lino floor in my wet trainers. "It's after 2:30 in the afternoon." Except she didn't say heck. Hannah caught my arm and pulled me to the side. "Remember mobiles?" she said sarcastically. "You know, that wonderful invention of modern times." I peeled down my drenched rain hood. "Did something happen?" I croaked. "Where were you?" Mum gave me a suspicious look. "I kept calling." "Sorry," I mumbled. "Mr. Edwards will see you now." Saved by the secretary. A woman in a long blue dress led us through a grey door and down a long corridor to our lift and up to the top floor and through another grey door with a brass plate that said Mr. Samuel Edwards. A man wearing glasses and a black suit came out and shook our hands, half his mouth turned up in a smile. "Please," he said, "come into my office. See all round, please, Susan." The secretary nodded and left. Mr. Edwards faced us across a big desk and linked his fingers together like he was praying over the stuff on it. A laptop, a neat pile of documents, a telephone, a desk lamp, and a box of pocket hankies, a Union Jack paperweight, a posh gold pen in a holder. There was a framed photo of a boy smiling over the candles of the birthday cake, another of an old girl on a pony. "Thanks for coming," he said very slowly. He took off his glasses and rubbed them with a white handkerchief like he was waving a surrender. "You must all be very anxious, so I'll tell you as much as I am able to at this point in time." The secretary came in with a tray, and Mr. Edwards paused again while the cups were handed out, and he motioned to the silver pot of sugar cubes, like we had to have one before he could go on. Mum splashed in 3 lumps and stirred her tea hard. Hannah grabbed one and crunched it between her teeth. "I think you know by now that Leon is being questioned over some really rather serious allegations," Mr. Edwards said in a slow voice of his, like words cost a lot. Which they probably did, and he wanted us to get our money's worth saying them. "We know," said Hannah, breaking the official Secrets Act. Mr. Edwards gave a small, sad smile. "I'm afraid the charges have been stepped up." Mum gave him a sideways stare. "What do you mean, stepped up?" Mr. Edwards shifted on his seat and fingered his paperweight. Leon was now being questioned under the Prevention of Terrorists Act. Hannah gasped. Mr. Edwards' words hung in the room like thick drops of glue sticking the air together. Prevention of terrorism. I felt my fingernails digging into my palms. My dad was no terrorist. Section 58. Collection of information useful for a terrorism act. Mr. Edwards read from the paper on his desk. Section 59. Inciting terrorism overseas. The pre-charge detention could be up to 28 days with a special warrant. At the moment, the situation's stable, he continued quickly. Leon hasn't actually been charged with anything yet, and until he is, he ran his fingers where his shirt collar rubbed his neck. "I'm monitoring your dad's case carefully, believe me, and making sure he gets his full legal protection he's entitled to." Stable? I imagined Dad balanced on a tightrope between tall buildings. Mum's cup clattered down onto the saucer and she let out a strange laugh. "I understand your distress, Mrs. Vane. I was so shocked, as you were, when I found out Leon had been arrested. Believe me, you know that we were friends at school together, but he had classified files on his computer at work and—" "Of course he did," cut in Mum. "He works for the Ministry of Defence, for goodness sake." "There were files he didn't have clearance for." Mum went quiet. That was serious then. "He's been questioned about stealing confidential military files and selling them overseas." Mum stayed very quiet. That was really serious. Mr. Edwards wiped some sweat off his forehead. "I don't need to tell you the implications," he said quietly. "With our country involved, in several armed conflicts at the present time. When do you think we'll get to see Dad? Put in Hannah. We have rights. Mr. Edwards sighed and shifted the position of some paper on his desk. I was telling your mum earlier, given a few recent events I'm sure you know about, there's been some rapid tightening of the anti-terrorism law. The family are allowed no contact while the suspect is being held, not before he's formally charged, and even then. What? Mum said, her voice straining. No contact at all? I couldn't help blurting. Mr. Edwards looked up at me and tapped his finger on his desk. I tried to smile, which made his face wrinkle up like a Guy Fawkes mask. Your mother tells me that it's your birthday on Sunday, Nathan. Maybe I can arrange a call between you and your dad on compassionate grounds. He fiddled with the cuff of his jacket, looking shifty. No promises, though. What if he's found guilty? Mum fiddled with her wedding ring. Her face flushed like she was embarrassed even thinking about that. Mr. Edwards leaned forward, the way I'd seen Mum comfort relatives in a hospital. We're looking at a long prison sentence, Mrs. Vane. I just sat there, like I was tied to the chair. How long? Mum asked, her voice all scratchy like an old record. Mr. Edwards joined his hands together and pressed 2 fingers over his lips. Perhaps life. Mum gave a little cry. Bit extreme, isn't it? She said, her voice strangely faint. Hannah kept tugging and tugging at her hair. The leaked information, Mr. Edwards was choosing his words carefully. It is all right. Already thought to have led to the fatalities in the military. Hannah knocked over her tea, soaking the papers on the desk, and Mr. Edwards rushed to pick them up. What? She said shakily. Soldiers died because of it. Information about their position fell into enemy hands, said Mr. Edwards. That's all I can say about it at present time. Soldiers died? Life in prison? The words like a bomb falling. Then the explosion that changes everything. But you can't move. You're trapped under rubble, and it's pressing at your chest, and you know nothing can ever be the same again. But you just can't move. Life in prison? Memories of Dad flickered in my mind like a film reel. Dad and me writing our names and sparklers on bonfire night. Dad and me playing football on the fields. Dad and me singing songs in the car on a hot summer's holiday. Dad running along my bike as I wobbled along, alongside my bike as I wobbled along. Dad reading me a book as I sipped hot chocolate. Dad meeting me at the school gates and lifting me up onto his shoulders so I was taller than anyone. Dad carrying me in his arms as I fell from the tree. I just wanted him back. I just wanted my dad back. I felt a hand on my shoulder, and then Mr. Edwards pulled a fist of paper tissues from the box and dabbed spilled tea off his table. He smiled at us, that lopsided smile of his, but I saw the worry on his face, and I saw it wasn't fake. Dad had said not to trust anyone, but why not trust Mr. Edwards? He'd help me, surely. I felt the weight of his secret again, like a chunk of stone inside me. Mum stayed sitting there, her mouth sagging open. Maybe, well, they obviously got the wrong person, said Hannah. So how are we going to get him off? The odds are not looking good at the moment, I'm afraid, Mr. Edwards said, planning for if he had been charged. We do need to discuss his best defence case, but it's not simple. He paused to throw the tissues in the bin under the desk, and I saw a bald spot on the top of his head. The case against him, frankly, it's stronger by the hour. The prosecution have got footage of Leon going into the Ministry of Defence offices after hours. There's also footage of him at secret meetings, allegedly receiving money in exchange for military secrets. What? Mum gasped. Mr. Edwards leaned forward a little. The best defence case we have is this. He paused to clear his throat. Leon mentioned to me that he had been collecting evidence on corrupt members of staff. I stared at the solicitor. What was he saying? He says it was true he was at some of these meetings. Mr. Edwards went on, but he was acting undercover. What, like he was James Bond or something? Spluttered Mum. Would the judge take that claim seriously, do you think? More than likely the prosecution would see this as a weak attempt to blame others for his crime. He refuses to say anything about it to the authorities, which doesn't put him in a good light. I understand Special Services removed everything from the house. Mum nodded like a dashboard toy. All Leon's stuff, yes, his papers and his computer data, everything from his study. Mr. Edwards nodded back slowly. I'm just waiting for copies to see if there's anything that could help Leon's case, but the prosecution's arguments are becoming very persuasive. For a moment he seemed distracted, staring at the family photos on his desk. They find your weak spot, he muttered. Apply pressure. I saw his hand were tight balls, and his fingers had gone white at the tips, and I don't know why, but he had this kind of scrunched, haunted look. It didn't look right. Mr. Edwards cleared his throat. What we really need to do is to find the evidence Leon collected. I blinked hard. If we find the evidence, if this evidence actually exists, it could prove his innocence. I sat there staring at my hands, willing my face not to go death white or bright red or give me away. I remembered Dad by the bonfire, the way he held my arm. You've got to follow Lily's trails, Nate. Without evidence, we've got nothing. I found something out. It hit me hard. Where all these clues were leading, I hardly dared to think about. The evidence, whatever it was, could that be the end of Lily's trail? The evidence needed to get Dad off.